بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So last week we stopped on page 36 or 35 and not that many pages left, less than 20 pages left inshallah for the rest of the book. So the next rule, number 7, as it says, maximum 7, the 7th rule, and those coming after it, just like a lot of the rules before this, a lot of them are based on, or the examples are based on, fiqh issues that, if you read the book alone, it's assumed that the reader understands the issue already. That's why sometimes somebody said they was reading the book the other day, and it wasn't clear. It was kind of confusing. That's because a lot of the examples that are given in the book are based on that the reader understands the issue already. You know what I'm saying? So therefore, sometimes you might read the example and you might look, well, how does this apply to the rule? So we're going to try to, and that's why I try to use the clearest examples from the examples that he uses. Some examples might take too much detail to explain what it is before you can get to why it's applied here. طيب. He says, rahimahullah, al-qa'idah al-sabi'a mukhalafat al-kuffar mashru'a. Number 7. The 7th rule is differing with the disbelievers is legislated in the Sharia. Differing with the disbelievers is legislated in the Sharia. Meaning that to be different from those who don't believe in Allah and His Messenger, it's okay, Islamic. It's no problem with the Muslim distinguishing him or herself from those who do not believe in Allah and His Messenger, which is, this is an issue it needs a lot of detail, honestly, and the Shaykh, rahimahullah, he doesn't give much detail. As this whole section right here, under this principle, is only a page and a half. And you need a lot more. The issue of imitating the non-Muslims, imitating the kuffar, imitating the disbelievers needs a lot more detail than a page and a half. Okay? And that's why one of the first things he said, after he said that this is a tremendous rule, this is a serious rule, but right after that he says, Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah has written a book on the subject. This whole book's written about imitating the non-believers, imitating the disbelievers. The book's written. So a page and a half is not enough to come to a final conclusion because it's a lot of issues. Is it that we're not allowed to, we say, imitate or be like the non-Muslims at all? There's nothing we share in common with the non-Muslims? Are there specific things we share in common with the non-Muslims? Are there things that are allowed for us that we do the same thing, we say the same things, right? What are the prohibitions? All right, so it's a lot of detail connected to it. But before we go that far, the word legislated, what does legislated mean? And this is for, I'm sitting at home reading the book. It says, differing with the disbelievers is legislated in the Sharia, as it says, Sharia.
Established by proof in the Quran and the Sunnah.
It is established by proof in the Quran and the Sunnah that what?
That's what legislated means.
So make it fit here. It is legislated in the Quran and the Sunnah, or it is established in the Quran and the Sunnah that it is okay, it is allowed for the Muslim to distinguish yourself or be different from the disbelievers. Those who don't believe in Allah and His Messenger, they do things different. The Muslims do things different. It's okay. It's important to understand that because some Muslims think that we have to melt and we have to transform into whatever the disbelievers do. We don't have to, right? No, we don't force anyone to believe what we believe. We don't force anyone to fast 30 days. We don't force anyone to fast to pray 5 times a day, right? There's no coercion in the thing. We don't force anybody. And it's the same thing applies. Some of us think, some Muslims think that because we live amongst non-Muslims, we have to submit to everything that they do, everything that they see to be correct, they have to submit to it, which is not the case. So even though he didn't get detail to it, that topic in itself needs a lot more detail than a page and a half. But the point of that is that this book is not for that. This book is only bringing the principle itself. We should understand that Islamically, it is legislated in our deen that we be different from disbelievers. In what? That's what requires detail. Because there's some things that we share, which is okay, and then there's some things, as he mentions, he says an example of the act which falls under this rule is the prohibition of resembling disbelievers in clothing and appearance. And if you leave it like that, it will be misunderstood also, because it needs more detail. What does that mean? We left it like that. What does that mean in clothing and appearance? He says right after that, as is detailed in the chapter of rulings related to dhimmis. The dhimmi, it says dhimmis, the dhimmi. Dhimmi, that, with a that mean. The dhimmi is the non-Muslim that lives under the rule of the Muslims. So there's a non-Muslim disbeliever, and they live in the land of the Muslims under the Islamic establishment, under the Islamic government, and they live there with the Muslims. That's a summarize of what it would mean, right? That means they're living under the laws of the Islamic rule, right? So in that case, right, let's just say it's two non-Muslims that live in the land of the Muslims, right? And let's say they want to get married, right? They want to get married. They know the land of the Muslims. They want to get married. So they go to the Islamic court. And they want the Muslims to marry, right?
We used the other way around.
We used the other way around. So it happens when non-Muslims live in Muslim lands and they want to get married. So they go to the Islamic courts to get married. But if they do that, right, they're bound to the Islamic rule regarding marriage. You with me? They're bound to the Islamic rules regarding marriage if they come to the Muslims to get married. That's possible. They can get married however they get married. Just on them. But if they come to the Muslims to get married, then they're bound to the rules of the Islamic marriage, everything that goes along with it. But yeah, point being, he says, as is detailed in the chapter, because even if we left it like that, resembling the disbelievers in clothing and appearance, what does that mean? That's very general, super general. And the issue is not that general. It's a lot more detail to the issue. He says, likewise, the Prophet ﷺ differed from the manner of the polytheists in many rites of the Hajj. As far as departing from Arafat after Maghrib and Muzdalifah, then he brings the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and the Tashabbuh, women. Whoever resembles a people is from them. With the explanation of that hadith itself. Point being, the qaida itself is to show that it is okay, more than okay, that there are some things that the Muslims should be different from the non-Muslims. Right? And it's a lot more detail. He gives an example. He says the dhabit. The dhabit, it says here, the precept. Another word for precept, anybody? Precept. Precept. There you go. Yeah. No, you got it. The precept. How do we know? I'm gonna take a while. I'm gonna throw it out there. It says the precept to this maxim. How do you tell me what you come up with? All right, the precept. How do you gauge the gauge? What's the gauge of what we can resemble the non-Muslims in and what we can't? What's the gauge regarding this ayah? The principle is that what is legislated is established in our deen to be different from the non-believers. He gives an example. He says what? He says in their clothing and their appearance. But what's the gauge when it comes to clothing? How much clothing can we wear that we wear and the non-Muslims wear? You understand? Or our appearance. How much of us we can look the same as the non-Muslims. Right? He says the gauge to determine how far. Yes. Okay. General rule. That's cool. So the rule is one thing, and you got a sub rule under that. The general rule to determine what you can. He says every matter, everything which is particular to the polytheists, everything that is particular to the Christians, meaning that is a symbol that person is a Christian. It's specific for them. Then the Muslims should not take on that, whatever it is, whether it's a piece of clothing, an article. If that's specific for what they believe, then the Muslim should not imitate them in that, whether it be clothing or appearance or whatever the case may be. Or if it's a specific article that the Jews wear, that's from their belief, that's from their, right? You should imitate them in that. That means it's specific, meaning if the Christian wear it, maybe the Jews don't wear it. Or it could be the Jews wear it and the Christians don't wear it. Or it could be they both wear it.
I know you said it's a real detailed issue, but what you just said, is it in the sense of like something that they wear that identifies them as a Christian or Jew? Like that's clear cut. Like
Right.
that,
Right. Something that identifies them as a Christian or maybe as a Jew, right? That you shouldn't imitate them in that, right? Why? Because there's some things that the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims all wear, right? Right? For example, belts. Let's just say, for example, a belt, right? A belt specific to Christians, or only Christians wear belts, or only Jewish people wear belts. You understand what I'm saying? Some things are shared, which is fine. But now we got to get into, okay, some things are specific for specific people. Not just Jews and Christians, it says, or others. It's in an Ahl Kitab, the people of the book, or other than the people of the book, who are not considered to be from the people of the book. That we know right now today. Atheists, even if they're atheists, or who? Hindus, Buddhists, right? Which, just as a side point, the Muslims are allowed to eat the meat of Jews and Christians, not Buddhists. You gotta be careful, man. So, I don't know about should I go over that? Never mind. Listen, but yeah, he says this is because if it's specific to them, he says this because resembling them outwardly, he said it leads to the agreement with them inwardly. And this is why when it comes to their holidays, we gotta be careful as Muslims. If they're celebrating their holiday and they believe that Jesus, they believe Isa is the son of God, and they celebrate his birthday, and that's what they do. There's no reason for the Muslim to feel like we have to, right, engage in their holiday. We shouldn't feel that way. There's no pressure on it. There should be no pressure on us that they do what they do. Allah told us in the Quran that you have your deen, and we have our deen. And if that's what they're doing during their time, then that's what they do. We shouldn't feel like we have to imitate them in that. That's something specific for them. Later, he says also, moreover, it is also legislated, established in the Quran and Sunnah, to differ with the innovators. And he gives an example. He says, just like it is disliked to make sajda, to put your forehead on a particular place in order to differ with the Rafidites, the Shia. If you've never seen the Shia pray, sometimes they put like little stones or something on the rug. Like if they come in, they might put a stone down, and then when they make sajda, they put their head on the stone. Also, we should differ from the innovators, Ahl Bid'ah. That's assuming, y'all. That's assuming we know who the innovators are. That means they're established. We established that this group, or this person, or this group in general is an innovative group. And once that innovative group, they have things that they do that are specific to their group. They have signs that we should not imitate their signs. And that's why it says, it is disliked to prostrate, to make the sajda, put the forehead on a particular place. Why? Because they have this thing where every time they go on the sajda, it has to be on this thing. So don't be like that. We can make sajda anywhere. So we should also differ with Ahl Bid'ah. So it's not just different with those who disbelieve, but also to be different from the people who go against the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? To go against the sunnah, even if they are Muslims. They may be Muslims still, but they go against the sunnah of the Prophet. They go against the teachings of the Prophet alayhi salatu. So our deen legislates that we also do not imitate them and what they do. Pray. Then again, Shaykh al-Islam has a book, a very detailed book, and the name of it is written here. I don't know if it's translated. Which is a very detailed book. So a page and a half is not enough, but inshallah, there are a couple things here that are not very detailed, but the point is to understand that it exists in our deen. That's most important at this point. It exists in our deen. طيب, it says number 8, the 8th rule. القاعدة الثامنة دخل الأنثيين في مسائل. There are certain issues in our deen where the male is equal to 2 females. There are certain issues Islamically where the male is equal to 2 females. Right? And then he gives some examples: inheritance, blood money, the aqiqah, giving testimony, meaning bearing a witness, giving testimony if you need a witness for something, right? 1 male, you would need 2 females. Freeing from slavery, gifting wealth to children during one's lifetime. All of these are issues that it's assumed that the reader already knows these issues. And then he places them under this rule number 8. But let's just look, for example, at inheritance. Because inheritance is what is left behind for those people that inherit from a person when they die, right? Now, the boy gets twice as much as the girl. And some people use this as an argument against our deen. They say that what? You oppress the women. They give the women more than the men. Why would you give the woman? Why does the woman only get half? Right? Why does the man get 2 times that the woman gets, that the female gets, when they inherit from the person who died? Does anybody know? Huh? MashaAllah. Cool, great. Because Allah says so. Play it. It's all no doubt because Allah says so. And that works for me. Now that's what they want to. They want to know the reasoning behind that, because the person who doesn't accept that, right? And there are plenty of people who don't. They want to know the reasoning behind it, and the reasoning is, Allah. And it shows the just and the protection that Islam gives the women and the respect that Islam gives the women. That the women in Islam are always, from the cradle to the grave, under somebody's protection. Always. Someone is always financially responsible for the woman. Like, someone's always financially responsible for her at some point. Like, what does that mean? That means when she's born, upon birth, who's responsible for her? The father is responsible to take care. Like, she gets, as we said, when she's 25, she's grown now, right? That's what we say. She's grown. She's still living in the house. Huh? To me, even if for this argument's sake, she's 25. She's still living in the house. Whose responsibility is it? It's still her. The father is still responsible for her. Even though we live in a place where after 18, you've grown, you're finally on your own, Islamically, the father is still responsible for her. Until when? Until she gets married. Once she's married, the financial responsibility is moved to who? The husband. If she gets divorced, it goes back to who? The father, the wali. But if the father dies, the responsibility moves to who? Her brother. Or if she has a grandfather. So somebody is always responsible for her financially. So therefore, if the father were to die, let's just say, for example, let's just say it's a family, there are 4 girls, and there's 1 son, right? And a mother. 4, right? So that's 5 women and 1 man. The father dies. So now it's 1 son. He's responsible for who? All of them, including his mother. Therefore, from the inheritance, he's going to need double in order to take care of the people that he's responsible for. You with me? And that's just one of the examples of why the male is equal to 2 females in various matters. Inshallah, that's enough for that qaida. The point is, each of these, they come in different sections of the books of fiqh, and the reason behind them comes with it. Now, what's the rule? Not in all matters, and that's why I said in many issues, this is the case, but not in all issues. طيب, القاعدة التاسعة, the ninth principle, which is, I think this is the one. What on after that? طيب, the ninth principle, إذا اجتمع عبادتان من جنس واحد واستوت أفعالهما اكتفى منهما بفعل واحد. طيب. طيب, the two acts of worship are from the same type. They come together, and carrying them both out as the same is sufficient to do one of them. What does it mean? It means, and maybe the example will make it the principle a little more clear. Like, it says two ways this can happen. Either one, a person is able to achieve two acts of worship by carrying out one action. You can, as we say, kill two birds with one stone. You can do one action, and it covers two acts of worship. Like, he said, in this case, it is stipulated that one intends both actions together. Like, according to what is popularly held, according to some scholars. That's why it says, according to what is popularly held by the scholars. What is mashhur, which means everybody doesn't agree that he needs what? Intend both. They say what? If you can kill two birds with one stone, you can do two acts of worship, right? You can do one act of worship and it'll cover two acts of worship. They say, if that's the case, they say you need to intend both. That's what some scholars say. And that's why it says, this is what mashhur, right? This is what is famous. This is famous. So some disagree with that. So either way, he says, for example, how does a person, what is the example? The example is, how do you do one act of worship, but it covers down to two, right? 2 for 1. Okay.
Fast on Monday, but it's also one of the white days. But you always fast Mondays and Thursdays.
Jay, you fast on Monday, and Monday happens to be one of the white days, right from the middle of the month. So a person always fasts Mondays and Thursdays because it's a good fast on Mondays and Thursdays, right? But on this Monday, now it's also a white day. So now, what? Fasting Monday is a sunnah. Fasting the white day, it is also a sunnah. The white days from the middle of the month on the Islamic calendar, right? It falls on the same day. They're saying in this case, you need to make your niyyah for both. That's what they're saying. Some say you don't have to do that, but that's what that means. Good. Later, another example. He says, whoever is in the state of major and minor impurity. A person is in a state of major and minor impurity. Later, a person is in a state of major and minor impurity, right? That means they need to do what? They need to ghusl. It says then the Hanbali madhab, according to the madhab of Imam Ahmed, affirms that it's enough for the person to carry out the ghusl. The ghusl, because the major impurity requires what? A ghusl. What does the minor impurity require? Wudu, right? So now, the major impurity requires ghusl and the minor impurity requires wudu. So now they're saying that a person, it is enough that a person does the major tahara. They make the ghusl and that'll cover down for the wudu that's less than it. So in that case, they made one act of worship, but it covered down for two. Clear? And that's the issue that it's not.
Well, that's all right. Other they're like different with that. Because I mean, that seems like it makes sense that
Well, it's a good question.
Yeah, that's
all these are by intention. And if your intention is to remove the major impurity and you don't intend to remove the minor impurity, is the minor impurity removed?
that's the argument.
You with me? That's the discussion. A person uses the bathroom, which means they have to make wudu. right? So they already have to make wudu. Let's say they go to sleep, they have nocturnal emission, or let's just say they have intercourse with their spouse, right? And now they have the major impurity. They have to make ghusl now because they had sex, right? And they went to the bathroom, which is only requires wudu. So a person gets in the shower and they make the niyyah to do what? Make a ghusl because they had sex. Does that cover down for the wudu that they, right, from going to the bathroom? Inshallah. That's a discussion, right? That's a discussion. That's why it's mentioned like that because that's a discussion, right? He's not getting it all out here because that's not he's just mentioning it like that because that's a discussion of the niyyah itself. So yeah. So that's a discussion, that's an example, two examples of how one act could cover down for two. And that's the first type. He says that in that case, in those cases, it's stipulated that a person does what? Make the intention for both. For example, using the bathroom and having sex, a person has to make the intention for both, making the ghusl for both of them, to cover down on both of them. But there's another case where a person is able to achieve one of the two acts of worship with the intention, and the other one is waived. As long as you do one of the pieces, one act of worship, you don't have to worry about the other act of worship, right? For example, a person comes into the masjid and the iqamah is called. The call to commence the prayer in congregation is announced. That's a nice way to put it. The iqamah is called. They call the iqamah. Come in the masjid, they call the iqamah. It says that the prayer of entering the masjid, the 2 rak'ah for entering the masjid, is waived. You don't have to make it when you join. Why? Because you joined the jama'ah. So you came in, and originally you would come in, you would pray 2 rak'ah before you sat down, right? Like you come in the masjid, and as soon as you walk in, they call the iqamah for the salah. That means you never got to pray those 2, right? So they say the fact that you join the jama'ah and pray with the group, right? Those 2 are waived. It's clear. It's inside of what you already did. Clear? Like they said, that only requires one intention. That one only requires one intention. He says also, if a Muslim finds the imam in the ruku', you come in the masjid, and the imam is they already recited Al-Fatiha, he recited the surah, he said Allahu Akbar, and he went down into ruku', right? The bowing position. He says, and he utters the commencement of the prayer, which is signaled by saying Allahu Akbar, Takbiratul Ihram. Then uttering Allahu Akbar before making ruku' is waived. Clear? Right. It's waived. Meaning, you come late to the salah, right? The imam is already bowing down, so you're trying to catch the rak'ah. So now they're saying that what? When a person comes late and they say Allahu Akbar, usually before we go into the ruku', we say, recite Al-Fatiha, recite another surah, then we say Allahu Akbar again. So usually it's 2 Allahu Akbars before you go into the ruku'. Since you got there late, the imam is already in the ruku'. He says that the first takbir, Allahu Akbar, is enough for the second one. Meaning you don't have to make 2. You can just make 1 Allahu Akbar and then go straight into the ruku'. Clear? But pay attention because he says that Allahu Akbar, he utters the commencement of the prayer, the Takbiratul Ihram. That first Allahu Akbar should mean that you're starting the salah. This is my Takbiratul Ihram, to start the prayer. Clear? Not the Takbir to go into the ruku'. Like he says, this is according to the popularly held opinion of the scholars. Which means what? It's a discussion. If we use that wording, just from that wording, that means if this is according to the popularly held opinion of the scholars, that means there's an unpopular opinion, right? That goes with that. So it's another issue that is a discussion. It's a discussion. Like, and of course, this is not the place for the discussion. That's why it just says it's not sure. This is popular. The scholars popularly said it's not the area for debating back and forth. And this is one we deal with a lot. If Eid lands on a Friday, right? We dealt with this a couple times in the past couple of years. If the Eid and Friday are on the same day, then it is sufficient to attend one of the 2 prayers. enough to attend one of the two. Meaning the Eid lands on Friday. If you go to the Eid, you're not obligated to go to Jumu'ah that day. Right? The person's not obligated, which means they intend to go to their Eid class. They attended their Eid, they don't have to go to the Jumu'ah prayer that day. They can go to their Eid. I mean, they can go to Jumu'ah, but is it obligated to go to Jumu'ah that day? It's not obligated. For the residents? Not. For the imam. The imam is different. The imam is, we're not talking about the imam, we're talking about the people who want to pray. The imam is one thing. Does the imam still have to do the Jumu'ah khutbah? That's a different situation. He said the imam gave the Eid khutbah and it's Friday. So he had to leave the Eid khutbah and give the Jumu'ah khutbah. That's the situation. We're talking about the people just praying behind the imam. Once you pray the Eid, can you still pray Jumu'ah? You can still go to Jumu'ah. Is it obligated? In that case, it's not obligated because the person already prayed their Eid. I think that's coming up though. I think it's coming up about the resident. So these are just some examples of how that works. And some of the other issues are might take a little more detail before you can even get to why it happens. Point being, there are times when, right, one intention is enough for two actions. Then there are times when, as many scholars say, you need to intend both when you do the one action. And along those lines. This is an important principle coming up next. And it is says al-ibra bil-ghalib la-ibra wa-la-ibra bil-nadir. It says consideration is given to the general rule and not to the exceptional circumstance. Does anybody know what that means? Consideration is given to the general rule and not to the exceptional circumstance. This is important.
Maybe circumstance accepted amongst the people. It may go against the general.
Like it says, consideration is given to the general rule. I'm sorry. It says the ibra, consideration is given to, let's just say, the norm, or what's most, what's the word? I can't think of the word. The translation of this word here is kind of,
Like everything like accepted.
all right, you have the rule. Like if we just say, like for example, most people do something. You got some people which are, that's the exception.
This one I always come across. When you go to the masjid to pray, and that masjid got to wait 15 minutes to pray Maghrib. With the brother coming, like look at the sky right now. Go down, we got to pray. So if that masjid normally waits 15 minutes, wouldn't that be the rule of that masjid? Instead of the sky is purple, it's different than right now, 5 minutes.
Let's just say, if you say like 9 out of 10 people do something, that 9 is what? That 9 becomes a general rule, right? And that one person who doesn't is the exception. I just can't remember the word. But that's not. And this one, the example will make it a little more clear. Maybe that's why he translated it like that, the general rule. Because based on this example, to show there's a rule and there's an exception. And we live, and the point is, we gotta understand that we live by general rules in Islam. We don't live by the exceptions of rules, right? There's a general rule in Islam that Muslims cannot eat pork. That's a general rule. That's what we live by as Muslims. Is there a time that a Muslim is allowed to eat pork? Yes, but that's the exception, right? We don't live by the exception. So we don't leave out here today and say, we know Muslims can eat pork, right? You know what I'm saying? The brother was saying you can eat pork today at the masjid. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the rule is that Muslims, it's haram to eat pork. Is there a possible time where it is allowed for a Muslim to eat pork? Possibly, but that's the exception. And that's the consideration is given to the general rule. The general rule is what takes precedence. That's what overrides everything else. The exception is not what we live by. So, for example, he says traveling. Demonstrate this. When it comes to traveling, you travel. So, he says, there you go. So yeah, he says when it comes to traveling, he says traveling demonstrates this. Many permits are legislated with respect to traveling because it is considered a kind of hardship. So, a lot of things we're allowed to do when we travel based on what? Based on that traveling brings hardship along with it. It's difficult when you travel. Traveling is a hardship in traveling. It's definitely a hardship in traveling. Right? They say traveling is an issue where you're away from your house, you're away from what's normal to you. You're out there, as we say, on the island. Anything can happen. Anything can happen. So you put in a vulnerable position. And that itself is a hardship alone, let alone anything happen, right? Your bags get lost getting off the airplane, it's delayed, you get held up at the spot. Anything that comes along, you run out of gas on the turnpike, right? You travel, anything can happen. And because of those possibilities, Islam allows us to do certain things when we travel, like shorten the salat. So you don't have to pray. You can pray Dhuhr 2 rak'ah instead of praying Dhuhr 4 rak'ah. You can pray Asr 2 rak'ah instead of praying Asr 4 rak'ah. You can pray Dhuhr and Asr at the time of Dhuhr. Or you can pray Dhuhr and Asr at the time of Asr. All of those things are what they call here, he says, permits. Right? That's a permit. You get a pass to do that. Like if you're traveling, you can just do it like this since you're traveling. If you wasn't traveling, it'd be a different situation. But since you're traveling, you're away from your comfortable zone, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of things that Islam allows us to do. Like based on what? Based on the hardship that comes with traveling, or the possibility of the hardship that comes with traveling. That's why you're allowed to do those things. Like also, if you fasting, you can break the fast if you travel. What if you're traveling and you don't feel no pain or ain't no pain? Right? You can still what? You can still break the fast. Why? Because you travel. Like it says, so if a person, for example, a person traveled, they got on an airplane, AC pumping, right? Soft seats, first class, right? MashaAllah. They flew from New York to Cali. First class, seats plush, laying back. Alhamdulillah. It's going Ramadan, right? Is it any hardship in that? Would a person say some hardship in that? A person might not find any hardship in that situation. But does that mean because they don't find any hardship, they can't do all the things that the traveler can do? No. The person, even in that situation, they can still break the fast. They can still shorten and combine. They can still do all of the things that the traveler can do. Why? Because they're under the rule of the traveler. And because you are not experiencing hardship in your travel, you're the exception. Your travel is the exception in this case. The rule is that the traveler can do all of those things. It's possible you travel somewhere, you might drive 3 hours and it feel like an hour. AC blowing, no traffic, cool, nice car, mashallah. Nice driver, person driver is pretty good, right? And you don't feel it. Does that mean y'all not traveling? You're still traveling, right? You're still under the rule of a traveler. So the exception of you not feeling that hardship doesn't mean that you're not a traveler. Clear? That shows the easiness of Islam and the mercy of Islam that a person could, right, not feeling they still traveling. It wasn't a hardship, so we can't break our fast. No. You're a traveler, you're allowed to break the fast. It's that simple. Clear? So he says all of the permits, all of the, if we say a pass is given, right, where you're permitted, a person can do that even if they're not feeling the hardship that is expected when a person travels. It's possible you travel and lose all your luggage. Anything can happen. It's possible you travel and you lose your wallet. Are you traveling and you're long, you're just tired. You got kids in the car, they gotta keep stopping to go to the bathroom. Somebody's hungry, 45 minutes, somebody else hungry, so, right? You just went to the bathroom, somebody gotta go to the bathroom, another half hour, stop and go. So a 3-hour trip turned into a 5-hour trip, right? And you didn't bring enough money for a 5-hour trip, or you don't have enough gas, anything can happen. And all of that falls under the traveler. Whether you experience the difficulty or not, as long as you're a traveler, you're allowed to take those permits in that situation. Play. He says, likewise, a resident combining 2 congregational prayers due to it raining. Number one, who is the resident? The resident is who? The person who they reside there. That's their home, right? They're not just passing through for the weekend, right? You're in your house. You live there. That's where you live. It says, likewise, a resident combining 2 congregational prayers due to it raining. So the understanding is, it's allowed to do what? This is the issue by itself. Is it allowed to combine prayers due to rain? Okay. Is it allowed to combine prayers due to rain? It's allowed to combine prayers due to rain. Meaning if it was raining, like it was raining last night, right? It rained real hard last night. So now, it would have been allowed to combine, let's just say it's Maghrib, it's pouring down, right? You go to the masjid for Maghrib, you can pray Maghrib because it's time for Maghrib, and based on it, due to it raining, Islamically, you can pray Isha right now after we pray Maghrib, and everybody go home and stay in the house for the rest of the night. Islamically, you can do that. You can't shorten them, right? You're home, you're at your house, you're not traveling, but you go to the masjid, right? We're not shortening Isha. We just gonna make Isha at the time of Maghrib. Why? Because it's raining, right? So it's raining. People go home, they don't have to come back out in the rain. That's an issue itself. We're not getting into that. But Islamically, that is allowed. The details of it is not. He says here, likewise, a resident combining 2 congregational prayers due to a rain. It says this is permissible for whoever is in the masjid, home, and whose way to the masjid is a roof passage. A roof passage. So say for example, right? Say for example, you live somewhere where when you walk to the masjid, it's like an awning on top of it. The whole way to the masjid, you wouldn't even get wet. Is it still allowed for the person to combine due to rain? Allahu Akbar. No stone has been left unturned. MashaAllah. So number one, the issue about praying in the masjid is one thing. But what about the person that's home? Because that's what he mentions here. It says whoever's in the masjid, right? That's one thing. You go to the masjid, right? And sometimes that's why it's important to know the sunnah. Because sometimes things happen in the masjid, you stop in the masjid to pray, and they do something from the sunnah that we don't know is from the sunnah, we think they crazy. We're looking at them like they crazy because they're practicing the sunnah and we don't know that sunnah. So now we start to criticize people who are practicing the sunnah because of our ignorance of what the sunnah is, what the sunnah of the Prophet is. And then he says, that's one thing at home. But what about, that's one thing at the masjid. Then he says, home. The person who is at home. Because you're not at home, what's the point? The point is this. The people who leave out and go to the masjid to pray in the rain. Is it difficulty? The idea is difficulty traveling in the rain, along with the danger that comes with traveling in the rain. Car accidents, anything can happen. So now, based on it raining and everything that comes with the rain, the people going to the masjid can combine, right? So does that mean that's the ghalib, that's the general rule. Based on the rain, we can combine the prayers. Does that mean for the person who doesn't experience the difficulty that those people are experiencing? Meaning, if I walk all the way to the masjid, I don't even get wet because there's something blocking the rain. That means I can't combine? You understand? Because I'm the exception, it doesn't apply to me? No, it applies to everybody. Even if you don't get wet, it still applies. It's raining, it applies to you. Just like the traveler. The traveler is based on what Mavinda. They say Mavinda to the Mashakka. That's an area of difficulty comes with traveling, right? That's general. Difficulty comes with traveling, right? Now, is it possible I travel and there's no difficulty? It's possible. But because I don't experience difficulty, does that mean I'm not a traveler? No. And it's the same thing for the rain, right? With the rain comes difficulty. So because I'm not outside, does that mean I don't take the ruling of it raining? It's raining. You get the idea? They say, so the fact that it's raining, it applies to everybody, not just a certain group of people. That's the idea. That's what's meant by the general rule. The general rule takes precedence over the nadir, what is the circumstance. My circumstance is exceptional. How many people walk to the masjid and they have like a barrier on top of them, blocking them from the sun or the rain or anything else, right? That's as he says here, is the exceptional circumstance. That's not the norm. The norm is that most people got to come out the house, get wet, get in the car, drive over there in the rain, look for other people speeding on the way to the rain, sliding in the rain. Most people are doing that to get to the masjid. Or even if you were walking, you're walking all the way to the masjid, you get wet the whole way to the masjid. You get to the masjid, you're soaking wet. There's a bunch of other people there soaking wet, right? That's normal. The exception is the person who comes out of the house and his whole way to the masjid is a barrier blocking the rain from hitting. So just because he didn't get wet and the other 100 people at the masjid got wet, that doesn't mean everybody else can combine. And since you dry, you can't combine. You're the exception to the rule, right? Everybody can combine. So yeah, is that clear? The issue of combining due to the rain is an issue that is too detailed to deal with right now. There's a lot of talk, there's a lot of discussion amongst the scholars understanding about what you can combine and what you cannot combine due to rain. And that's a very detailed discussion. Later. He says also, the same applies to forbidden matters which are forbidden due to their harm. There are things that are haram because they're harmful. There's harm in it, and Allah made them haram based on the harm in it, and Allah's wisdom, Allah's hikmah. Like, what if a person, so suppose a person, what Allah made haram, it doesn't harm them. It's haram, and there's harm contained in it, but the harm doesn't affect that person. Does that mean it's not haram? Even though they're the exception, that you're not harmed by it, but that doesn't mean you're excused from the general rule, right? He says, suppose a person found, it says they still forbidden, and an example is given at the bottom of page 43. It says this because consideration is given to the general rule, not the exception of the circumstance. For example, it says, this is the matter of intoxicants which are forbidden due to their harm. Liquor, just say liquor, getting drunk, it's harming, right? There's a person, he says, if a person is unaffected, what if a person, they drink liquor, but it doesn't make them drunk? Right? That's the exception. And the exception is not given to that person who's not affected. Right? What takes precedence? The rule is that it's not allowed, it's haram to drink alcohol, period. Liquor is haram. Whether you're affected by it or not, it's still haram. You're the exception, and the exception is not given precedence over the general rule. Right? That's why it says at the bottom, if a person was unaffected, by intoxicants, the intoxicants would still be haram, it's still forbidden on the person, right? And others, because in his case, it's an exception. That's the exception that alcohol doesn't get you drunk. That's an exception. We don't live by the exception. We live by the rule. Muslims are not allowed to drink alcohol. I don't know. We don't have that like. There's like a part that I heard somebody tell me. Right, a Christian told me before that. They said that this is what I was told. This is what I was told. I don't know what. Maybe they got different groups. They said that it wasn't about drinking wine. They said you can drink wine, but you just can't get drunk. something like that. He said, you can drink wine. But they said, some Christians say that. Muslims say that. The Muslims say that's it. Living by the rule. The rule is that the Muslims can't get drunk. You're not allowed to drink wine, liquor, beer, whatever else gets you drunk. That's the rule. Even if a person says, well, whatever they say they drink it for, right? Because it don't get me drunk, so it don't bother. No. That's not allowed. You're not allowed to live by the exception of Islamically. Islamically, we live by the general rule, which is that intoxicants, as he says, liquor here is haram. And that's an important principle, that we live by the rule and not the exception, because there's a lot of people living like that. There are a lot of Muslims who live by the exception, right, and not living by the rule in a lot of different areas, a lot of different things. Well, I thought we was able to do this, right? But that's if your situation is like all the way over here in left field. That's not for everybody. Well, I thought the brother had said, no. The rule is, this is the rule. The rule is that's haram. What makes you think you don't fit? Why doesn't that apply to you? In order for a ruling to be removed from a person, it has to be an Islamic reason that it's removed from a person. An Islamic reason. Does Islam recognize the reason you're using as a valid reason? You with me? The Muslims are required to fast Ramadan, period. Are there some people who are not required to fast? Yes, Islam excused this group of people. If you fit that group of people that Islam excused, alhamdulillah. If you don't fit into the group that Islam allowed to excuse, then that's not for you. You don't have the authority to break your fast. Right? There is no time when we're not required to make the salah. The salah is never drops off. Even if it's sick, we lay in the bed and Allah protect us, we can't get up, we can't move, and Allah protect us all. Still required to pray or in some way Islam. So to live by the rule is important because a lot of people live by the exception. And when you live by the exception, it's backwards. And we wonder why we have problems as far as our deen. The deen is very, very organized. Islam is organized. It's not chaotic. Everything is very organized. There's wisdom in everything. But what we try to do, as they say, we try to buck the system. I'm going to try to do it like this. I'm going to do it like this. And then we wonder when it don't work, we try to blame the religion for it not working. Right? For example, this happens all the time. Islamically, a woman needs a wali to get married. So what happens? The sister doesn't have a Muslim man in her family, so she does what? She's looking for a wali. The problem is, she really wants to marry the brother. So now what? She's willing to put herself in harm's way in order to marry the brother. So when the wali comes, she chooses a wali, and the wali starts to do what a wali is supposed to do. Because unfortunately, and this is why inshallah, we're going to do another class, a lot of our sisters don't understand what a wali's job is. They call him a wakil, wali, whatever it is. Even if he's the wakil, a lot of our sisters don't understand the job of the wali or the wakil. So when the wali or the wakil is actually doing his job, they get upset. They go, you're doing too much. That's overkill. Yeah, a lot of our sisters think the job of the wali or the wakil is just to come the day of the marriage and stand there. They don't understand that it's a job. He's responsible for Allah. That the wali or the wakil is supposed to look over the sisters like that's his daughter or his mother getting married. He got to investigate the brother, make sure the brother is somebody that's worthy of him handing you over to. That's his job. So when he's doing his job, he's doing too much. That's too much. That's over. And that's what Islam put the wali in place for. So what a lot of sisters do, they leave that wali. They fire him. I'm going to get another one. Ooh. They go fire him and go get somebody who they don't, usually, he ain't going to say nothing. He probably doesn't know. He probably doesn't know what he's supposed to do as a wali. And he does what? He marries her right off. Get the job done. Boom. Right? Get home in a month or two, the brother beating on her. Now you want to come back. Say, how Islam let men beat on women? Islam don't let men beat on women. And that's what the wali is in place for, to make sure that he's not a woman beater. But you ain't give him no time, right? You wanted to get married tomorrow. You ain't give him no time to investigate and make sure the brother was worthy of marrying. Right? You ain't let the wali do his job. Right? So now what we do, we try to buck the system. The wali system is put there for protection of the woman. That's what it's for. If you try to buck the system and then you become unprotected, you can't blame the deen. You can't blame Islam for that. You went against the hikmah that Allah placed in the religion of the wali or the wakil, taking that position. You go pick a brother, he don't know what a wali's supposed to do or what wakil's supposed to do in the first place. Right? And you put him in charge of you and he doesn't know what his job is. He doesn't know what the job entails. And in that case, majority of the time, sisters, it don't work. Majority of the time. 99, 95, I say 95, but I really want to say 99% of the time when that happens, it don't work. Because sisters, what y'all gotta understand is, and this happens, the wali is placed there for a benefit for the sisters. The man doesn't need a wali. Why are you letting the brother you get ready to marry choose your wali? Why would you let him choose a wali for you? The wali is to protect you. The man has nothing to do with the wali. We talking about people who don't have fathers, Muslim fathers, and Muslim family members. These sisters, they go to the masjid. The problem we have now is some sisters say, well, I'm not comfortable with those brothers. The brother at the masjid don't deal with me properly. I don't even trust them. Right? What's her other option? She can choose a person that she sees to be Islamic. What can she do? She can do that. She chooses the person, but you got to understand that person you choose is responsible for Allah to look out for you like he would look out for his daughter. And if he's not looking out for you like he would look out for his daughter, then that's a problem. Right? He might be over. He might be in. You know what I mean? He might not even be able to look at you like that. It's realistic. So if that's the case, you can't buck the system with the wali and try to take, as we say, we call it a back door. You can't go a back door route. And then when it don't work, you want to say you want to blame the masjid and blame the Muslims and blame all the brothers and blame the deen. And y'all, you can't do that. You didn't even take the proper steps that Allah laid out. Right? Allah laid it out with hikmah, with wisdom. We trust Allah in everything. But now since you want to marry him, right, you don't trust the wali process. Now he's doing too much. And most of the times it doesn't work. Most of the times it doesn't work. Allah musta'an. You gotta be careful. Hopefully, inshallah, when you tell the cap, when it comes to the wali, we get into detail about who is qualified to be a wali and who's not qualified to be a wali. What is the job of the wali or the wakil, and what's not his job, and all those things that come with it, so that the sisters can have a better understanding. Because, wallahi, some sisters call crying because they don't understand. They didn't know what a wali was supposed to do. And now they're looking at the brother who was her wali, like, and you must not really want it good for him. Because you didn't do anything that a wali's supposed to do. But he might not know. He might not have been educated on what a wali's supposed to do. That's why it's better. It's better to follow the law that is the Islam that Allah laid down. Because there's wisdom in it. Even if we don't understand it, there's wisdom in it. In terms of, you ready to stop? If there's any questions? Naeem didn't get assisted with Mike today, so they can't ask their questions. So, any questions from the sisters? Next week is an important party here. That is what we're sharing. In the custom of the people, also the custom and the habits have a place in Islam. Did you vote for it? You might not be able to vote for it, but wow. No questions? We'll stop here, inshallah. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.